this presentation, we'll examine the ideas behind understanding by design. I'd like you to take a look at this picture and write down what you see. You can pause the presentation to write down as much as you see here. Initially, what you see is a forest, but after close examination, you can see an elephant, a lion, a pig, a deer, a horse, a giraffe, and a small rodent, perhaps a raccoon. So what have we learned? In our teaching experiences, it's important for us to look at the global and sequential aspects of teaching and learning. But overall, it's important for us to see big ideas and big pictures as well as the inner workings. Although our curriculums are huge, it's important for us to get past daily activities, to go below the surface so that we can see big ideas. To take notes throughout this presentation, I'd like you to pause here and grab an 8x10 sheet of paper and make a zine. And again, you can pause this presentation to make that. First, let's look at the stages of backward design. The first is identifying desired results. The next is determining acceptable evidence. And finally, planning learning experiences and instruction. We'll look at each of these in detail. To start, we have to ask ourselves, why backward design? A lot of times you'll see teachers giving students activities to do every day in class, but they never really take the time to clarify why those activities are important, or to clarify the performance goals for the students. Why are we doing this activity today? What is our overall goal for this unit or for the year? By thinking through the assessments up front, we ensure greater alignment of our goals and means, and that teaching is focused on those desired results. This helps us to weed through some very large curriculum guides to decide, do I really need to do this activity if my end goal is this? Grant Wiggins is a big proponent of understanding by design, and here he talks a great deal about that topic.
Like many of you, good prep school, had a lot of good students, and I was really puzzled by students who were smart, dutiful, showing up for class, clueless. It really puzzled me as a phenomenon. It also became clear to me, by design, I was not a good planner. I knew the kind of provocation that I wanted to engage people in. I could plan a lesson, but I had a sense that you could do a better job than this. And really, where I discovered it in a weird kind of parallel universe way, I became a much better planner and teacher on the soccer field than I did in my English class and my philosophy class. Because I was still wedded to the conception of pretty egocentric conception, that what we're going to cover and what I want you to understand is central. Even though I was doing Socratic seminar, even though I'd gone to St. John's, where you do seminar 4 years standing. But it was obvious on the soccer field, you're on the sideline, man. There's nothing you can do. And soccer is one of those great sports, very fluid, lots of executive decision making, and one of the few sports where you can't call timeout as a coach. You're stuck with what they do. And so there you really see the movement back and forth. We learn some things, we do a little scrimmage, we go to the game, yikes. Back to the drills. True story. When I left Loomis, I was coaching girls varsity soccer, and my co-captain, Liz, was a constant offender. All the things that we'd worked on in drills, she would just run around and be a ball hog and keep doing the same old things. And one day, I tend to be reasonably quiet as a coach. I'll talk to myself, and people will hear me mumbling, but I I said, "Where's all the things we've been working on?" God's honest truth. She yells back in the middle of the game, freezing everybody on the field. It was like those old E.F. Hutton commercials. "We would, Mr. Wiggins, but the other team isn't lining up the way we did the drills." Epiphany. Epiphany. The best way to understand backward design from your goals is through that story. You can teach, you can do exercises, you can do worksheets, you can do assessments, and you think they got it. They don't get it until they try to transfer it in the game. So, by design, we want to plan backward from our goals. And one of our chief goals is something called understanding. But the word that I want you to think about today is transfer. Can the student transfer their learning? Because after all, the point of school is not to get good at school. The point of school is to use what you've learned in school somewhere else. To say it a slightly different way, which is truly troublemaking, the goal is not to see if they learned what you taught. That's not the goal. In fact, that's a trivial goal. That's a mere means. The goal is to see if they can use it when you're gone. In other classes, outside of school, in the future. In other words, it's future directed. It's not what did they learn of what we just covered in the past.
What he talks about there is essential to this idea that our knowledge has to be transferable and it has to go past the activities that we present students in our classrooms. So what I'd like you to do is think about this in terms of a mission statement. If we are to transfer knowledge to our students, then it has to be a larger goal for our English classes, our math classes, our science classes, than just the activity that we place before them on one particular day. What's the mission of your class? What's the mission of your course? Why are you doing this? What are you doing and why are you doing it? Once you've identified those desired goals, those desired outcomes, then it's important for us to move on and think about the key focus on big ideas. What specific insights do we want students to leave with? What are the questions that are going to frame those insights? What are the students going to know and be able to do? And then what content standards are addressed or will address those questions in the unit? We have to look at the huge curriculum guides or the huge units that we get and categorize them into 3 areas. What's the enduring understanding that goes back to our mission statement? When they leave your class at the end of the year, what should they transfer to next year or for the rest of their lives? What are the things that are important to know and do that may be a little outside the scope of the enduring understanding, but skills that we still feel that students should know? And then what's the knowledge that's worth being familiar with? When you can categorize them into these 3 areas, it makes the decisions about what activities you use or have students complete a little easier. It makes it easier to cut certain things from a large curriculum guide or where to focus your attention. We have to ask provocative, essential questions and really set these up for students before we start a unit. These questions should have no obvious right answer, and they should also raise other important questions that maybe we can have students research or think about throughout the unit. They should address the philosophical, conceptual foundations of our discipline. Why do we teach science? Why do we have math? They should recur naturally, and they should provoke and sustain student interest. These are not objectives, because that would be a daily thing, but they should be based on the outcomes of learning the content that we teach. So what's next after you come up with those questions? How do we know if the students understand or are able to answer those questions and transfer knowledge? This comes through assessment, not testing. which leads us to the next stage, determining acceptable evidence. Evidence of understanding is a greater challenge than evidence of knowing whether or not the student has a correct answer. Understanding is inferred. It's not something that you can answer A, B, C, or D. The student needs to be able to show that they know. This brings us to an idea of making learning visible. Walking around the classroom and looking at what students think about the learning through use of whiteboards or placemat activities or gallery walks is going to be essential here, which leads us to formative assessment as being our primary means of looking at whether or not students get those essential questions rather than just a summative test. In order to understand if students really see a big idea, we need to see patterns. Students don't just master something in one test and that's it. We have to think about assessment as more of a photo album than rather a snapshot. A test provides a snapshot of whether or not a student gets a concept. A photo album shows us a pattern. What I'd like you to do is come up with multiple measures for an assignment that you have. You can go to the wiki and find the example assignments and come up with a multiple measure for each one. When you've finished with coming up with the assignments, I'd like you to think about the type of assessments that we use. Traditional quizzes and tests are okay for things that are worth being familiar with or even some things that are important to know. But for enduring understanding, our assessments need to be open-ended, complex, and authentic. We need to provide students with the opportunity to research things and bring back their ideas, to come up with their own questions about what they want to know. And once we finish with the assessment, what's next? What should occur in the classroom when we've decided how we will assess learning? What activities will lead to that enduring learning? Our activities have to be both effective and engaging. I'd like you to look at this acronym of where to. First, we have to think about where we're headed. What were the big ideas? And then how to hook the students. What opportunities will there be to be equipped to experience and explore the key ideas? What will provide opportunities to rethink, rehearse, refine, and revise for students? This is an area that we're often lax in, where we don't have enough time in our day or in our unit for students to refine or revise their thinking. But it's essential that our activities do that if we're going to get students to that enduring learning. How will the students evaluate their work? One of the key factors of student success is self-reported grades. So students need to be in the evaluator's chair. They need to be able to use their grades to affect their own learning. How will the work be tailored to individual needs, interests, and styles? Differentiation is going to be key. Not everyone should have the same handout. Not everyone should complete the same activity. If this is a photo album to show us the student's mastery, students should have some choice in what they include in that photo album. And then lastly, how will the work be organized for maximal engagement and effectiveness? I'd like you to think about what it means to grade for mastery. Take an opportunity to look at the Teaching Channel video, which shows the tiered exit tickets. In this video, the teacher uses her exit tickets to plan her activities for the next day. Now that you've finished this presentation on understanding by design, I'd like you to create a top 10 list of the essential ideas behind understanding by design. Like Jay Leno, start with maybe the least essential and go to the most essential. Feel free to use humor to increase your own engagement. But ultimately, think about the mission statement for your class, what the big ideas are for your own subject matter, how you're going to assess that in a way that provides reflection and student-reported grades, and then how you're going to create activities using the where to method. When you're finished, please upload your top 10 list to the shared drive.